diverse ingredients are touched and flavored by each other, and yet each has its own distinctive flavor. As Americans, the American spice of the stew, we are a part of a culture that promotes and values individualism, competition, and individual achievement. When you think about this country as a collection of immigrants, people from different histories and traditions coming together to live and work together, promoting individualism makes sense. When you don't share deep common traditions that have evolved over millennia, then valuing individual pioneering efforts and accomplishments is practical and understandable. And certainly individualism, competition, and individual achievements are qualities that have yielded innovation and creativity and has been the hallmark of American ingenuity. That's great. But we as Asian Americans also are part of cultures that promote and value the group, the collective good, the community, the family, and an ancient wisdom that no one does it alone. No one really achieves or accomplishes anything by him or herself. Rather, it has taken many, many others to create the opportunity for that individual's achievement. There's a story about a monk speaking to a young man, and the monk asks the young man, "Who are you?" And the young man responds, "I'm Chin." And the monk says, "I didn't ask you your name. My question is, who are you?" And so the young man thinks a moment and he says, "Well, I'm the son of Yang." And the monk says, "I didn't ask you who your father was. Who are you?" And of course, each time the young man responded, his response was not adequate to answer the monk's question. The point of the story is that the young man could not define himself without referencing his relationships to others. And in fact, neither can any of us. We are defined by our relationships with others. We do not do it alone. We do not succeed alone. And I believe that those of you in this room tonight understand that. That your being here is a demonstration of the value you hold for community, for connecting with others, whether a mentor or a mentee, to build mutually supportive relationships. No one does it alone. You've heard Kathy's introduction of me, and I've been fortunate to have a career that included experiences and accomplishments that have been rewarding for me. Well, I didn't do it alone. My life would have been very different had my parents not decided to immigrate from a China that was impoverished, famine-stricken, and just establishing a communist government after a brutal civil war. My life would have been very different had my family not encouraged and funded most of my college education. My life would have been very different had individuals throughout my life not shared with me their perspective and wisdom in what I call moments of mentoring. These individuals, whom I would call my mentors, probably didn't even know what they provided for me. They were not necessarily people I knew well, or people who were close to me, or people whom I had a long-term relationship or connection with, although some of them were. These mentors were individuals who made the effort to pull me aside and give me a clue about something they thought would help me. I am eternally grateful to all of those unsuspecting mentors for showing compassion for a colleague. But believe me, I would certainly have benefited much more from the Apex Mentoring Program had it existed at the time. I was also very lucky that I did have a long-term mentor. As you may notice, I'm a very Americanized Chinese with little Chinese language facility. When I was executive director of Chinatown Service Center, I discovered someone who could and would give me good advice and insight about navigating the immigrant Chinese community, about the challenges immigrants face, and even about managing a multi-million-dollar organization. Let me tell you about my mentor. He was my father. Many immigrants, like my father, came to the United States with very little money. But he did have some advantages. He came with the advantage of education. Even by American standards, my father was a well-educated person. In 1939, about 15 years before he immigrated with the family, my dad was a foreign student, and he earned a master's degree in economics and banking from Stanford University, and was in a doctorate program at USC until World War II began and ended his studies. Despite those credentials, he was a Chinese immigrant who spoke English with a significant accent. American banking institutions in the 1950s made no pretense about their racism and their discrimination. There was no subtlety involved. The ceiling wasn't even glass. It was solid and impenetrable for an immigrant of color. So to support the family, my dad worked 3 jobs. He had his day job, which was his career entry-level job at a bank. He had another job at night, and a third on the weekends. And when he realized that he would not be allowed to advance in banking, he left banking to manage an import company, but banking was still his passion. Now you might be thinking, why didn't he work for a Chinese bank? Well, there were no Chinese banks in Los Angeles at the time. Kind of hard to imagine, isn't it? Up until the 1960s, Chinese in LA had few financial institutions that would provide them with home or business loans or credit. And none had any interest in establishing a branch even close to Chinatown. So eventually, my father, along with some friends and investors, started the first Chinese-American bank in Los Angeles. In 1962, my father became the founding president of Cathay Bank. Today, Cathay Bank is a successful, well-respected international bank with stock listed on the NASDAQ. But in those early days, it was just a little storefront in Chinatown where Dad would sit all day waiting for customers and waiting for customers. In fact, when I was about 11, he made my sisters and me go down to the bank and open accounts with our allowance. He must have really been desperate for those deposits. But Dad quickly realized that what was needed was to educate the Chinese community about the advantages of banking services, because they had no banking services available for a century. There were banking services that could help their businesses. He would tell them how they could own their own homes, and that they didn't need to speak English or to travel outside the community or to even have established credit to get banking services. He spent much of his time visiting businesses and counseling business owners. And over time, the community grew and prospered in a way that it was never possible before. Now, I confess, I didn't always appreciate my father's struggles. I was a rebellious one. My father was a banker, and well, I devoted my career to nonprofits. But in spite of myself, I learned deep and important lessons from my father. He modeled for me the meaning and the value of commitment to the welfare of a community. And as I grew to appreciate his knowledge and wisdom, I sought his advice. I wanted to learn from his experiences and his perspective. Now, my father and I chose very different professional fields. I still don't know much about banking, and he still totally does not get nonprofits. But that didn't matter, because the value of his advice came from his life experiences with people, with community, and in this society. He taught me about adversity and how to face it with dignity. Let me suggest to you that although the APEX program has attempted to match your career interests, the value of your mentor-mentee relationship will be in your sharing experiences that transcend the particulars of your professional field. There's a reason why we all have chosen to be here at this APEX event among Asian Americans. The mentorship is not just about, I'm starting in marketing, you're established in marketing. Or I'm a new engineer, you're an experienced engineer. Although those things are important, the mentorship, I would suggest to you, is about what we've encountered as Asian Americans in the corporate, business, and professional world. What challenges or obstacles might we find? What strategies have worked or not worked to overcome those challenges? As Asian Americans, our American experience is unique from other Americans. And as Asian Americans, we have a heritage of community values that draws us to Apex and to the mentoring program. Here, tonight, right now, we are building community together with a commitment